For Saturday is Family Day. And so I think exhibitors have mixed feelings about Family Day because there's a lot of people here and most of them are small. But I love it. I love to see families. I love to see them engaging in family history in whatever way that we can. I actually just visited a vendor called Turning Little Hearts. So if you go to their website, turninglittlehearts.com, they have the cutest books, little workbooks that you can take your littles through to help them understand the power of their family history in their own lives. They're really cute. So I bought those. I always try to buy something from a vendor every year, a vendor that I haven't seen before. So that was my purchase this year. Of course, DNA tests, we always do that. But it's, it's fun. It's fun. There's fun energy on Saturdays here at the exhibit hall. But that's not why we're here. We're here to answer your questions. We have several that were submitted to us yesterday. So let's just jump right in. Let's start with, do half second cousins always match? This person has a match who shares a great grandfather with me according to our trees. She tested at Ancestry but hasn't shown up in my match list. So a couple of things about this question. Number one is second cousins, full second cousins always share DNA. But a half second cousin is more like a third cousin as far as DNA ranges go. And so you only share DNA with your third cousins 90% of the time. So yeah, there's a 10% chance that you wouldn't share DNA with this match. Now, it's not going to be exactly that because half second cousin is different than third cousin. But so it's possible that you just don't share DNA. But a couple things I want you to try. Number one is, you said you've looked for them in your DNA match list and you don't find them. But my question is, how did you look for them, right? Some people put their initials. Some people put different names. Like, are you sure you would know them if you saw them, I guess is my question. And if the answer to that is yes, then my next question is, has your sibling or another related person on your family line taken a DNA test? And can you compare and see if this match shows up with them? So, if you have 4 or 5 of you that have all tested from this line and this half second cousin isn't matching any of you, then that's a little more concerning and you may want to double check your genealogy. So take a look. Again, make sure you know what you're looking for. And if you don't see them on your list, check others and then take next steps if you need to. Okay. All right, another question here. Why do I need to keep my DNA tree private if all my DNA matches are living, as they will be privatized by the DNA testing companies? So I'm not sure where you got the impression that you should keep your DNA tree private, but let's first talk about what a DNA tree means to me. So for me, it's important to have a tree linked to your DNA test results. So you do that at both Ancestry and MyHeritage, but you have a tree that is useful for creating and maintaining your DNA connections. So especially at Ancestry, because you can link your DNA matches into your tree. So you can build your DNA match, we talked about that yesterday, build your DNA match into your tree, and then you can link that DNA match from the DNA match page onto your tree. So then it's super easy in the future. You're scrolling and you find this match again and you're like, wait a second, who was this? But you've already linked them, so you can just click on it and that takes you right to that point in your tree where you're connected with them. So it's really, really, really handy. But it also means that at times you're going to be building other people's trees in your tree, and there's going to be a ton of extra people that you aren't related to, and so it can make your tree kind of heavy and messy in a way. And so I don't want you to use your research tree to contain all of this kind of DNA research. It gets really messy. And so when I say DNA tree, I mean the tree that's a version of your tree that you're using to interact with your DNA test results. And that tree needs to be public. It has to be public so that it can interact with all the tools at our testing companies. So I don't advocate a private DNA tree, only a public one. But maybe what you're talking about, sorry, it's kind of hard when you're not here. Maybe what you're talking about is if you're working on a very sensitive, like birth family kind of situation, and you're building a DNA tree for someone looking for their birth parents, then yes, that should maintain the privacy of everybody involved because you're working with the living people. And so when you're saying here, if all my matches are living and they'll be privatized, well, eventually they won't be, right? You're going to encounter some people who are deceased, in which case their names and information will show up. And so it's just a best practice if you're working on those more recent connections that you are keeping that tree private. So I hope I kind of covered all the bases. Again, it was a little difficult for me to fully understand your question. So thanks for being patient, and I hope that we were able to answer. All right, so Brian, it's not too late to ask questions. Please post your question here in the chat and I'll be able to see it and then I can answer it for you. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Melanie, for weighing in on that. And then Jose's saying, so could I find a third cousin from Nigeria? So the real question is, has a descendant of your shared ancestor taken a test? And people who are in countries like Africa in general are not well represented in our databases. And so could you find that person? Well, yeah, you can if they test, but then it's not guaranteed, right? You have to wait for someone to test that's going to be related. So it's possible. And you just, you test yourself and then you are, present and kind of waiting for that DNA match to come. So C's, you're asking, link my DNA to my tree or my DNA tree. So I link my DNA to my DNA tree. So I create a DNA tree that is just a duplicate of my family tree. And then I use that when it's because I'm building other people's trees within that tree. And so you're just putting so much stuff in there that isn't really relevant to your own family history. And so that's the tree that I'm linking to my DNA. So I'm interacting with that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to head back to my list of questions. Let's talk about some sticky segments. So the question here was, how do sticky segments work and how likely is it that one segment in the 40 to 50 centimorgan range goes back to a couple born in the late 1600s, especially when it's numerous matches and not an isolated case? So if you're asking, first of all, let's define what sticky segments are. So sticky segments are pieces of DNA that are passed intact from one generation to another. So when I teach this, I call it the William Clark effect because I have a case study from a friend of mine whose ancestor, William Clark, she can see that essentially an entire chromosome has been passed down for several generations. And so if we had time, we would go into the whole how DNA is inherited and that whole cellular process of separating the chromosomes into their different cells. Anyway, it's fascinating, but just trust me that this is possible, right? That these larger-ish pieces of DNA are passed down generation after generation, but it is rare. And so the fact that you have several people sharing the same piece does make me a little hesitant. So if you think about the odds, okay, let's say that we have a couple here in the 1600s. Let's say they're your fifth great grandparents, okay, maybe sixth great grandparents. And you think about all the changes, all the passing down that has had to happen generation after generation in order for even just two people to share the same piece of DNA, it's astronomical, right? And so if you're sharing a very large piece of DNA, the more likely scenario is not that it was passed down from one single recent common ancestor, but rather that it's a common piece of DNA that's popular in your population, and it was passed down to all of you through very different channels. So it's just a simple message of odds of when what's more likely to have occurred, that this is a very popular segment that has existed in this population, and so everybody got it, but they got it from different people, or that everybody got the same one from one ancestor so long ago. So my vote is, it's a population segment, even though it's relatively large. I think if you had the purview of a big testing company, you may see that there are hundreds of people sharing that same segment that are all from the same population. And we call that a pileup region. And so those are a little bit hard for us to identify on our own, but testing companies like Ancestry use tools like Timber to kind of identify those pileup regions and downgrade them so that they aren't playing as big of a role in your actual DNA matching experience. So that's one of the roles that Timber plays, is to identify segments like this and say, hey, they're not as important as you thought they were, essentially. Okay, let me go back here. I saw this question from Susan. So Susan's like, what do you think will be the next big thing in DNA testing or tools? And I think we're always looking for, more automated ways to do things. And I do think that we will continue to see more automated ways of doing things. But I'm usually an advocate of doing it yourself in a way, or at least walking alongside any automatic tool. For example, auto clustering been a big topic here at RootsTech, since Ancestry is looking like they're delving into this arena. And again, a computer is really good at what it does, but you and your big brain are actually pretty good at this too. And so I like to think of these tools as tools, right? They assist our big brains, and we get into trouble if we just trust them implicitly and just think, oh, that tool knows better than me. And so I think the next big thing in DNA and in tools is just going to be a continued growth and volume of people who've tested. I think that's the most immediate benefit we're going to see, especially people from other countries, as they have more exposure and the testing companies do better at marketing in these other countries. But I also think that in the next, not too distant future, I do think the next big thing is going to be a greater ability to move further back in time with our autosomal DNA. So no longer be stuck in that 3 times great grandparent generation, but be able to move back further beyond that. So that's my hope. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking. And that was a little bit the same as another question that we received, that there's so much advancement going on. There's so many new tools, and it's exciting, but it is a little bit overwhelming. And where do I start, and what new tool do I try first? And really, I just want to reframe your question, because the better question is, what's your research goal? Who are you looking for? And you want to build your tool set around your goals. So if you are working on, say, finding a 2 times great grandparent, for example, then you need to follow, the plan as we outline at your DNA guide, and you need to group your matches, and then you need to work with your matches to find your generation of connection. You need to figure out how they're related to each other and how you're related to them. And that's it. That's the process. Now, if there's something in that process, a tool, like if you really like auto clustering and you want to use that to help you find your group of matches, great. Then you bring in that tool at that stage. And then if you like the shared matches of matches tool and you want to learn to use that to help you better understand your matches' relationships to each other, then you bring in that tool at that point. So there's a really well-defined process for finding an ancestor using DNA. And as long as you're on that path, you can bring in tools to help you with each stage. Just don't get distracted by, oh, cool, I want to map all my chromosomes, which is fun and it's great. But is it going to help you with your goal? Then, don't do it, right? So I guess that's my main point, I guess. All right. Mike's asking, is there a simple way to learn the dot system at Ancestry? So Mike, on this YouTube channel, we do have 2 videos, one for Ancestry and one for My Heritage, about how to use the dot system. And so hopefully after we jump off this live, you can search my YouTube channel and find those videos, and I will just walk you right through it, because it is such a powerful system. So using it well is going to change your life. I'm not even kidding you. Let's see. We've got just like 1 more minute. Let's see what Brian's saying here. He's asking, how can I find my second great grandparents on my direct maternal line? I have a brick wall. It stops at my great grandma. We have no information on parents or siblings. Okay, so Brian, what you do is you follow the plan. So if you're looking for a 2 times great, then what you want to do is start by finding a match who's a descendant of the ancestor you want to research through a different line than your own. Okay, so if you know your great grandma, right? So other descendants of your great grandma would be your second cousins. So you need to find second cousins. You use the shared matches tool on them, and that will create for you a network, a group of people that are related to you through your great grandparents, your maternal great grandparents. And then what we do in the plan is we help you split that network until you end up with a group of leftovers. And those leftovers are going to direct you to that relationship. So it's a very realizable research goal to find someone at that distance from you. So you can for sure watch the RootsTech class I taught yesterday on just one match. That should be up on their website now, so you can watch that, and that will really help you too. Okay, thank you all so much for joining me live here from RootsTech. It's been so fun to be here and so fun to meet so many people who've come and said hello at our booth. And those of you who have watched virtually and commented on my lectures, I so appreciate you for coming and supporting me even virtually. And don't forget, we do have a free webinar next week. So if you go to yourdnaguide.com, I'm sure there's a banner up there at the top that's going to ask you if you want to register, but you can also go to yourdnaguide.com/rootstech. And I'd love to see you in our free webinar next week. And until then, good luck and keep working, and you'll get there.